All right. Hello. Does anyone know his name? I'm Sheesh. What's up, Amber? Good to see you. Hello. Cindy came over from TikTok. Hey, Cindy. Thanks for being here. Yeah. I got banned on somebody reported me for misinformation. Can you imagine? Coffee. Thank you so much. What's up, Manners? Good to see you. Okay. All right. Are you reading all of Revelation? Yeah. We're gonna be focusing on Revelation 20. Actually, we've been in Revelation 20, verse 1 through like 6 for like three sessions now. It came from TikTok. Awesome, Brenda. Are you scared? Oh, okay. I just usually the mute section. I like the format and can give gifts. Awesome. Yeah. Well, that's super cool. Rachel. I will try to remember that. I think I can do that. But yeah, you guys have options. Like, okay, so that's a perfect example. If you guys haven't followed me on YouTube, go follow me on YouTube. Just got banned for misinformation. Crazy. Happens though. Happens. And so, hopefully TikTok doesn't go away. So anyways, let's pick up where we left off on this, I was in the zone, dude. I know, me too. I was like in the flow. I was like, man, okay, and then this happens, and bam, 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 bam. I totally understand that, Manners, because now I gotta like, okay, like what were we talking about? Okay, Revelation chapter 13. That was terrible. I found you over here though. Awesome, Don. Well, thank you so much for being here. All right, so get you in the zone. Yeah. Okay, I'm back on TikTok. Let's go. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What's up, Glory? Glory to his name. All right, so I was like, where did he go? The rapture happened. No, I'm totally kidding. I'm still here. And thankfully, because if it did happen and I was still here, I'd be like, oh no. But I'm totally kidding. One day closer to home, guys. I'm excited. I am so excited to just one day. I mean, just think about that. It's exciting, right? We are one day closer to home. And what an amazing thing that is. I'm just pumped. Like, I mean, one day we're going to stand before the Lord and it's going to be wonderful. And I just can't wait to okay. Do you no longer do TikTok stories to let us know you're going live? I do, Sandy. I actually did one about 30 minutes before I actually went live. But the thing is that I didn't know I was actually going to do it. And so that's like where I'm trying to balance like times because, right now the kids are home on vacation from school. And so now that they're home on vacation, it's just like doing it during the daytime. It's a little bit more difficult for me to say, hey, I'm doing it during the daytime. So today they're out doing some stuff. And so I was like, okay, I'm doing a Bible study. During the nighttime, it'll be a lot more, it'll be easier. So we're going to do this exact same study again during the nighttime. And so hopefully that'll be, I'll be able to put out a little TikTok story that people can see just to give them a little heads up. So sorry about that. That is not my intent. I do not mean to surprise Bible study. Anyways, Revelation chapter 13, you have two beasts. Yeah, I'm happy I'm here too. Awesome. But in Revelation chapter 13, you have the two beasts. You have the beast, the Antichrist, and you have the false prophet. So wherever one goes, the other one is going. And so the false prophet is able to do all kinds of signs and miracles and things in the sight or in the presence of the beast. And so that's really, really important to recognize that it is a duality. They're a dynamic duo. What's up, Tamara? Good to see you. So the false prophet, what we see is that he's going to be breathing life into the image. And that's really fascinating because if you go back and you look in Genesis, what you find is that God, when he formed Adam, how did he make Adam alive? What did he do to Adam? He breathed into Adam. Now, what's also interesting is that Adam was made in the image. And so you have the image that God breathed into, and then you have the beast or the false prophet and the image that he breathed into. There are two images that are being introduced in this story called the Bible. There are two options on the table. You can choose Jesus Christ or you can choose not him. That's the option, the red line in the sand. And so this image is being breathed into, and this image is really interesting to recognize because in Matthew 24, Jesus tells us to go and read Daniel. He says, hey, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, spoken of by Daniel the prophet. And so Jesus authenticates Daniel. And so he tells you and I to go check out Daniel. And so when you go and you read Daniel, what you'll find is you'll read about a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth. And Antiochus Epiphanes IV was a bad dude. This guy, he was a Gentile and he persecuted the Jews. He hunted them down, chased them down. And not only did he do that, but he also walked into the temple and he built an image to Zeus. So that is an image. That was a foreshadowing, just like Antiochus Epiphanes back then made an image. Sometime in the future, Antiochus Epiphanes was a foreshadow of Jesus Christ, just like how Melchizedek was a foreshadow. Antiochus Epiphanes was a foreshadow of the Antichrist, just like Melchizedek was a foreshadow of Jesus Christ. And so when Antiochus Epiphanes desecrated the temple and erected this statue to Zeus in the middle of the Holy of Holies, Zeus, like the god of lightning, just like what he did there back then, Jesus is pointing to that time, and a Jew would recognize this because they know their history. And so Jesus is like, when you guys see that, run. And so here in Revelation chapter 13, you see that abomination of desolation being introduced to the story. And so the people are going to see that and they're going to run and they're going to just get out of there because Jesus told them to. He says, when you see that, flee to the mountains. And so you see this whole worldwide anti-Semitic kind of atmosphere that is going to be around during the Great Tribulation. Because in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus continues, he's like, run to the mountains, pray that your flight is not on the Sabbath, all these things. But then he goes on and he says, when somebody says, look, the Christ is over here, or, he basically starts warning about all these false prophets and all these false Christs. He's talking to the Jewish people. He says, when you hear that, do not be deceived. The Jewish people are going to be hiding. And so there's going to be all kinds of deception trying to get the Jewish people to come out wherever they are. Come out wherever you are. Jesus is over here. Come on, the Messiah is over here. And they're locked and loaded, ready to hunt these people down. And so Jesus is like, do not be deceived. And he's like, the sign of the second coming is going to be unmistakable. Make no mistake about it. It will not be something you will be confused by. Everybody will recognize it. And so anyways, Revelation 13, this beast this is when the mark of the beast is going to be implemented. It is going to be introduced during the Great Tribulation. It's not there for the first 3.5 years. It is there during the second 3.5 years. And so again, remember, now that the beast has revealed himself, remember in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, the Antichrist is going to confirm a covenant with many for 7 years. This is 7 years right here. But then in the middle of the week, which is 3.5 years, when 3.5 years is done, he's going to break that covenant. And then he's going to reveal himself. And then everybody's going to know and be like, bam, there he is. And then there goes the 3.5 years later to where he is going to be given his authority. And that 3.5 years is when his mark is going to be introduced to the world. And I was thinking about this earlier because, we're talking, many people are very aware of the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, all of these 3 letters, right? We're all aware of these things and their motive and what their agenda actually is, 2030, right? Big thing to pay attention to. But what I find very fascinating is that there is something on their agenda which is known as transhumanism. And when you pay attention to or dive into what transhumanism is, what you recognize is that is basically where they are blending humanity together with technology. And so I think it's really provocative to imagine what this mark of the beast is. I have no idea what it actually is. But one could make an argument that the transhumanistic movement that they are trying to get us towards, and they're going to paint a great picture on it, be like, oh, you'll be able to be fluent in all these languages and it'll be really convenient and all these things, right? They're going to paint it as best as they possibly can. But, transhumanism, where humanity, the lines between human and machine are going to be blurred. And so, iron mixed with clay, that whole idea, which is given to us in Daniel chapter 2, verse 44 or something like that. It's really interesting just trying to guess. I have no idea. I don't understand what this mark is going to be. Nobody does. But my point here is that we're seeing things surfacing right now, real time. It's a very real possibility. We are now entering a time period. 2025 is going to be unlike any other year because of the advances we're making in technology. And so what I want you to recognize is that if you're paying attention to where we are when it comes to the technological advances, what you see is that it's unprecedented and that it's leaps and bounds over anything we've ever seen before. And not only that, it's what we have. And when you recognize that it's what we, the public, have, then the question is begged, what do they have? Because if they are allowing us to have this technology, then what do they have? And if we have this, and if we can do all of these things, then what do they have? And so it's really interesting to kind of like try to balance and juggle these ideas, because we don't know what the mark is going to be. But the whole transhumanism idea is something that you need to do some research on. I was actually thinking about doing a video on that, just to kind of, I know it's something that a lot of people are aware of. But it's very provocative to associate that, what their agenda is, with the mark of the beast. That is where they want to go. And so it could be manipulating DNA in a sense, which is probably what it is, because how Noah was, in Genesis chapter 6, it talks about how Noah was, what's the word that it says, righteous or blameless. Noah was blameless. The idea of blameless is that he had unadulterated DNA, because that was back during the time of the Nephilim, and the Nephilim were mixing their DNA with mankind. And so all of mankind had tainted DNA. And so their DNA was manipulated. And so God sent a flood to wipe it all out. But Noah was found blameless. He was untainted. He was not tampered with. And so that is the idea that is postulated there. Anyways, Revelation chapter 14. In Revelation chapter 14, hey, I'm a biologist. None of that is true. What is a woman? In Revelation 14, we move on to the next thing, which is really kind of cool. I'm so sorry. But in Revelation 14, you have the 144,000 on the scene. In Revelation chapter 14, verse 1, you have this whole millennial scene. And the reason why I say it's a millennial scene is because the 144,000 are standing with the Lamb. They're standing with the Lamb. And so this is not something that takes place during the 7-year period. This is something that takes place in the future. This is something that is beyond the tribulation. And so John is looking further out past, after the Great Tribulation is over. He's looking out further out into the future. And he sees the 144,000 standing with Jesus. They're standing with Jesus. And so what that tells you and I is that the 144,000 survive. They were sealed with the seal of God. And not only are they sealed, but they survived. Every one of them survived. And so this is a whole promotion for the idea of eternal security. I believe if you are saved, you are always saved. Meaning, if it is a true born again, if you are actually born again, that's awesome. That is justified. You have been justified. Thank you so much, Chosen. And so it's really good to recognize that. Thank you, Chosen. And so it's really cool to see that if you are born again, you know how in John chapter 3, Jesus is talking to Nicodemus and he's like, you must be born again. When Jesus says that, Nicodemus is just like, well, whoa. And so when you recognize how that comes across to a Jew, to a Jewish person, there is many ways to be born again, or many times that you could be born again. And so when Jesus was talking to Nicodemus, and Jesus tells Nicodemus he must be born again, Nicodemus was like, well, I've already, did this as a Jew. I can't be a king. Being a king was considered being born again. There's I can't remember them all, but there's like 9 different ways that a Jewish person could be born again. So when Jesus was talking to Nicodemus already did all of the things that was humanly possible from his standpoint. And so Nicodemus looks at Jesus and is like, what do you mean I got to be born again? I can't. How is that even possible? Am I to enter my mother's womb? And Jesus is like, no. And so then he goes all the way down and he starts walking his way into, just like Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so shall the Son of Man, be lifted up. And he's painting a picture of the cross. He's like, the cross, the cross, the cross, the cross. Jesus died according to the scriptures. He was buried and he rose again on the 3rd day according to the scriptures. That is how you get born again. That is a one and done thing. You don't get born again, then unborn again, then born again, unborn again. It's like not like snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap. No, it's a one and done thing. Anyways, Revelation 14, you have this angel that descends from heaven and he's up in the heavens. He's there. He's visible and he's preaching the gospel to everybody on the earth. That is something that we need to recognize. So here, this is all the stuff that's happening. at this great tribulation, at the 3.5 years into the tribulation, all of a sudden, remember, I want you to imagine you're alive during this time. So, hey, thank you, Danny. I want you to imagine you're alive during this time. So if you're alive during this time, just to kind of visualize it, the market, hey, thank you, Chosen. Thank you so much for that gift. Thank you so much. It's very kind. If you're alive during this time, you are going to see or hear about the abomination of desolation being built in the temple. You're going to see the temple. You are going to see the two witnesses. And then also you are going to see the 144,000, maybe, but you're also going to see the angel flying up in heaven preaching the everlasting gospel. That's fascinating. And so not only that, but on the other hand, you have the mark of the beast that is being implemented into the world. And so the people on earth during this time period are going to have no excuse. They are going to have all the reasons to believe in God. And there's going to be people who reject it. There's going to be people who get the mark of the beast, and there's going to be people who reject the mark of the beast and will be ended because they refused it. That's terrifying. And so that's why I would encourage you to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior now, opposed to waiting until you do whatever you want to do because you think, well, I can't have fun. And it's not about you having fun. It's not about you living your best life. It's not about you only live once. It's not about you speaking your truth. It's not about that. It is about God and glorifying Him. Hey, thank you, Joseph. Thank you so much. Very kind, man. Thank you so much. And so our definition, our idea of ourselves, it's so lofty, and we need to really allow ourselves to think about that, because when we do, we should lower ourselves. We must decrease, right? We must decrease. And when we decrease, then all of a sudden we get to show people, and then we're serving people. And that's why Jesus literally decreased, right? When he, or in a sense, he served in a servant sense, he washed his disciples' feet. He lowered himself, right? You see this picture. It's really, really wonderful. But when you do that, we are glorifying God. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Hey, thank you, Chosen. Thank you so much for those gifts, man. Thank you so much. Anyways, Revelation 14. Everything is on the table in Revelation 14. You have the mark of the beast that is in the world. You have the 144,000 witnesses that are running around telling everybody about Jesus. Then you also have the angel that everybody sees. And he's telling the gospel in everybody's own language, right? And so everybody's hearing it. They are without excuse. That's Romans chapter 1. So it's fascinating to see that is what takes place during the last 3.5 years. And so when the mark of the beast is now brought out into the world, well, now is when we can get into the bowl judgments. The bowl judgments are not brought out of the temple until the mark of the beast is out. So now that the mark of the beast is out, and now that people on earth have the opportunity to say, I reject you, God, completely, because people are going to do it out of spite. There are people who are living openly defiant to him right now, and that is heartbreaking. Right? But he's so long, he's not willing that any should perish, right? We understand he is unbelievably long suffering, but there's going to be some day people are going to be able to make a decision that is unexcusable. It is unpardonable. And so the mark of the beast, if they decide to get it, what's up, Bridget? Good to see you, is something that is going to be an option sometime in the future. It's not here now, but it's going to be an option in the future. And the people who choose this mark of the beast is going to do it full knowing. No, they're going to do it full knowingly. They're going to know 100% what they're doing. It's going to be a very clear decision on what they're making, because they're going to see the angel. They're going to see the Antichrist. They're going to see the false prophet doing all these things. They're going to see the mark of the beast and see that this is something that they are telling me to do. They're going to see the angel. They're going to be like, which one do I choose? And then they're going to make a decision. And that decision is leading into Revelation chapter 15. So in Revelation chapter 15, it's basically a prelude to Revelation chapter 16. Revelation 15 basically sets the scene as what happens up in heaven. So in Revelation 15, you see these angels that show up, and they all go into the temple, and each angel picks up a bowl, and then walks away with it and goes out of the temple. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, guys. So they pick up the bowl and they leave. Another one comes in, picks up a bowl, and then they leave. Another one picks up a bowl and then they leave. There's 7 bowls, just like 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowl judgments. The bowls, in contrast to the trumpets, are different. The trumpet judgments, remember, they were a judgment of the thirds. It's a third, whatever a third is, a third of the ships, a third of the sea, a third of the trees. But the bowl judgment is 100%. It's whatever it's being poured out on, it affects everything in that category. What's up, Bridget? What's up, Look Up? How you doing? And so what I want you to recognize is that the first bowl that is poured out is on the people who choose to receive the mark of the beast. So now that the mark of the beast is implemented in the world, that causes a domino effect to where the bowls are now being introduced. So after everybody chooses their side, essentially, God is going to pour out a bowl specifically on the humans who choose to receive the mark of the beast. And that's terrifying for those people. Right? We don't want that to happen. We would not wish this on our worst enemy. And God doesn't even want to do it. What's up, Lucas? God doesn't even want to do it. That's why I think he's alone in the temple. I think he's in there by himself because he's like, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. And I proved it to the world that I don't want this by giving my only son. I am longing for you to want me. He's like, I want you to want me. And so people are like, no, 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 no. And because they keep saying no, God's like, okay, I'm not going to force you. Free will, right? Free will. Now, don't get me into the whole predestination issue. It's a simple concept, even though it's rather difficult to understand in a sense. But once you see it, it's just like, okay, well, now it makes complete sense. How you doing? Good to see you. Okay, so when you continue on, guillotines. Yeah, there you go. That is definitely something that I think is going to be brought into the picture. Ryan, are you a Calvinist? No. In Revelation 16, you're introduced to the bowls. And the bowl judgments are really kind of cool. He gives us opportunities. Absolutely, Jasmine. He really does all the time. He is not willing that any should perish. But he gives us, in Revelation 16, we see the bowl judgments here. Something to pay attention to is, we've talked about this plenty of times, but in Revelation 16, verse 12, the bowl judgment that he pours out is on the great river Euphrates. Now, this is fascinating because why is this like a bad thing, right? Like the question is like, okay, we just got done seeing God pouring out bowls on the mark of those who receive the mark of the beast. He poured bowls out on the waters, both the sweet water and the salt water. He poured bowls out on the sun. He poured a bowl out on the power of the throne of the Antichrist and his kingdom. So you have all those 5 bowls that he poured out his wrath onto, but the 6th bowl is different. The 6th bowl is just poured out onto the great river Euphrates. And so like, if you read this, the question is like, why is this such a bad thing? Why do we care if he pours out a bowl on the great river Euphrates? Because at this point in time, that river is completely turned to blood, right? Because if you read Revelation 16, you see the water's already turned to blood. So when you see a bowl being poured out into the river Euphrates, the question is, why is this a bad thing? And the reason why it's a bad thing is because when the river dries up, that is basically God essentially opening up a door for all the armies to cross into. And so what I want you to visualize, you guys know like a wine press, like where you stomp on it, stomp, 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 stomp. Well, in order for you to stomp, you're not just going to get in a bucket and start stomping. You need to get the grapes into the bucket in order to stomp on them, right? And so basically when God pours out his bowl onto the great river Euphrates, that's basically God opening up the bucket for all the grapes to enter into. So all the grapes, all the armies, these armies are all going to literally just walk their way into the bucket, and they're going to be like, wee, and they're going to jump in there, and they're all gathering. And so that's basically what this bowl judgment is. God is opening up the door for them to walk through. And so when he dries up the great river Euphrates, the armies are going to cross over on dry ground, and they are basically gathering into this great wine press. And he is going to stomp, 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 stomp on them. So just because the river dries up, doesn't seem like that big of a deal because it was all blood anyways, but it's what takes place after it dries up is why it's such a bad thing, because he just stomp, 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 stomp. What is up, Katie? Good to see you. Okay. Okay, so that's Revelation 16. Revelation 16, we talked about the Battle of Armageddon. The Battle of Armageddon, they gather at Armageddon. But the second coming is something that we need to recognize. The second coming doesn't occur at Armageddon. The second coming occurs at Basra. In order to understand Basra, you need to read Isaiah 63. In Isaiah 63, you read about how Isaiah is there. He sees somebody in glorious apparel, and it's Jesus. And Jesus is like, it's I who speaks in righteousness, mighty to save. And then Isaiah's like, okay, he's like, okay, now I know who I'm talking to. He's like, but why are your clothes red? And so what you see in that chapter is that Isaiah identifies, somehow he recognizes that Jesus was walking from Basra to where Isaiah was. So here's Basra, here's Isaiah. Jesus is walking from Basra to Isaiah. Isaiah's over here. He sees Jesus walking to him from Basra, and he's walking to him from Basra. And he's like, well, who is this who's coming from Basra? And so it's really fascinating to see this, but that is where the second coming is going to occur. Basra is in what you and I would refer to today as Jordan. Jordan is just east of Israel. And so that is where he is going to tread the winepress. There's actually multiple wine presses that are going to be trodden. But that brings in Revelation chapter 14 as well, in Joel chapter 2. You can unpack those if you would like to. You know, it talks about blood up to the horses' bridles. Joel chapter 2 talks about the valley of Jehoshaphat. Because at the valley of Jehoshaphat, which is just, so basically the idea, just to summarize it, is God is going to start treading the winepress, which is his second coming. That's going to take place in Basra. It's going to take place in Jordan. And then it's going to start here, and he's going to work his way back to Jerusalem. So it's going to be just an all-out just bloodbath in a sense, and it's going to be super gory during this entire thing. He's just going to eliminate. He's literally treading, right? Like he is just stomping. And if you read Isaiah 63, it's like, I tread the winepress alone. He's doing this by himself. You and I come back with him, but he goes before us. And if he's going before us, he's taking care of business. You and I are there, as what we'll see when we get to Revelation 19, but he's doing it. He treads it alone. And so that's why his clothes were red. That's why Isaiah is like, why is your garments red? And Jesus is like, it's because of the blood of my enemies. He's like, it's not my blood. It's like all their blood. And so there is a treading of winepress that starts in Basra, which is over in Jordan, and it works its way all the way to Israel. And it stops outside of the walls of Jerusalem. And so outside the walls of Jerusalem, the valley of Jehoshaphat is basically where the sheep and goat judgments seem to take place. And so we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Revelation 17, you get to the next part, which is basically talks about, Revelation 17 is the hardest chapter in the book of Revelation, I think, to at least explain. But in Revelation 17, you have two things to pay attention to. You're introduced to a beast, and you're introduced to a woman. The woman rides the beast. And so wherever the beast goes, the woman is right there with him. And so wherever the beast goes, the woman's there. Wherever the woman goes, the beast is there. And so the question is, okay, well, what is the beast and what is the woman? Well, the woman is a picture of the false church. The woman is false Christendom. If you look out in our world today, it's all over the place, right? You can't even go down Main Street without seeing all these churches that are just completely lost. And it's heartbreaking. But they're deceiving people at a very rapid rate, and it's very sad to see. But the beast, so that's the woman, but the beast represents the political system. The political system for the first 3.5 years are going to be basically, it's a picture that is shown of 10 kings. There's going to be 10 kings that are a part of this political system for the first 3.5 years. So for the first 3.5 years, there are two systems that are in place for the first 3.5 years. The first 3.5 years, you're going to have a religious system and you're going to have a political system. The religious system, the woman, is the false church. She is there for 3.5 years. The political system, the 10 kings, is also there for the first 3.5 years. Then when you go from the first 3.5 years and you pivot to the last 3.5 years, that woman who was riding the beast gets devoured by the 10 kings. So now the woman is gone. And the reason why those kings devour her is because the Antichrist is emerging. He's already emerged. He's revealed himself at this point, and he's demanding worship. And so he's not going to compete with the false church. He's like, you guys are over there doing stuff. He's like, no, you're worshiping me now. And so it goes from the woman as a religious side of things, and it goes to the man who is going to be demanding to be worshiped. And so then, just like the 10 kings in the first 3.5 years, you understand from Daniel chapter 7 that the 10 kings go down to 7, because the Antichrist is going to pluck up or subdue. He's going to end 3 of the kings. And so the political system changes from 10 kings in the first 3.5 years to 7 kings in the last 3.5 years. And there's 2 religious systems that are there. The woman rides the beast is basically the idea. The woman and the beast, 2 systems for the first 3.5 years and 2 systems during the last 3.5 years. All right. Moving on to Revelation chapter 18. Revelation 18 is very fascinating because it's all about Babylon. The question is, what is Babylon? What is it? Where is it? Who is it? What's going on with it? It's an interesting concept, good conversations to be had all around. But what's really fascinating about Revelation 18 is that we are told about 3 players on the board that are associated with Babylon. You have kings, you have the merchants, and you have the ship masters that we are told about. Kings, merchants, and the ship masters. The kings are part of the political system, right? Hey, thank you, Roxanne. The kings are part of the political system. The merchants are the economic side of this system. Hey, thank you, Waverly. Thank you guys so much. And then after that, you have the ship masters, the transporters of all the goods, right? And so when you look at Babylon, the question is, what is Babylon, or who is it? Well, back in ancient Babylon, it was in Iraq. And so if we were talking about ancient Babylon, it would be over in the Middle East, and it would be an actual physical location. But I think the way that it's used here in Revelation 18, I think it's used more symbolically to represent a different place in the world. It's going to be representing a different system that is going to be arising or has already arisen up into the point that we're living in right now in 2024. And so many people postulate that current day Babylon is America. That's what many people believe. It's a very real possibility, very, very well could be. But there's a oneness associated to Babylon. I think that's important to recognize, because if you go back to Genesis chapter 11 and you look into Babylon, the first verse in Genesis chapter 11 talks about how there was one language, there was one speech. So there's one language, one speech. Everybody was on the same page. Everybody understood everything. Everybody was talking to each other. They had one goal in mind, right? So if you read further down in Genesis chapter 11, God shows up and he's like, okay, he identifies that nothing that they want to do is going to be withheld from them. And that's crazy, because God says that they're going to do whatever they're going to do, and it's not going to be withheld. It's not going to be withheld. They're going to do it. Let that sink in for a second. God says in Genesis 11 that nothing is going to be withheld from them, which means that whatever they put their minds to is actually going to take place. That is crazy. And so basically God's solution, or a temporary Band-Aid that he slapped on that problem, was confusing their languages. And so the languages have always been a barrier to the mission of a oneness. And so now we're living in a world where now that's no longer an issue. Now everybody can speak to anybody, no matter what your language is. Just pay attention just go to the United Nations. You see all the nations there. There's like 185 nations there, and they got their little signs in front of what country they're from, and they all have like a little earpiece inside their ear. And so whoever's talking, somebody is translating what's going on and what's being said. That's crazy. There is no more language barrier. And so anyways, Revelation chapter 18, you talk about Babylon. Very, very, very fascinating kind of conversation, unknown as far as what is Babylon. Everybody has their ideas. Wouldn't get too lost in it, though. Secondary issue at the end of the day. But in Revelation chapter 19, you have a very cool chapter. In Revelation 19, verse 7. In Revelation 19, verse 7, it says, "Let us be glad and rejoice and give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come." So who is the Lamb? Who is the Lamb? The Lamb is Jesus. So John is saying, or seeing, or writing down, he says the marriage of Jesus has come. And so all of a sudden you're like, hey, thank you, Amy. You're like, Jesus getting married? What's that all about? Well, yeah, the church is the bride. And so it's really fascinating seeing this. You can go back and see a picture of that in Ephesians chapter 5. But in Revelation 19, the marriage is the picture. In Revelation 19, verse 17, the marriage is what is in focus. But in Revelation 19, verse 7, it's the marriage. But if you read Revelation chapter 19, verse 9, the focus is on the marriage supper. So you need to recognize there is a difference between the marriage and the marriage supper. They are two very different things. The marriage is where the bride and groom say, I do, right? Like anybody get married here where they had to drive across town to go to a reception, to the reception area? Like, we're going to get married in this church, and then we'll see you guys 10 minutes from now. It's right down the road. Just take a right. You'll see the signs. Like, that's the reception. So the marriage supper is the reception. So here in Revelation chapter 19, verse 9, where it says, blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper, the marriage supper is the reception type thing. And so that's an amazing thing to really understand, because John is writing down, blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper. So when you identify who is a part of this marriage supper, well, of course, it's going to be the bride and the groom. So you have Jesus there, and you have the bride. You have you and I there. But then those who are invited to this marriage supper, who are called to this marriage supper, well, that brings in the question of who's going to be called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Well, that's where it gets kind of fun to dive into, because now all of a sudden you start understanding that there's a difference. There's categories in the Bible. You and I are in the church age. You are a part of the church. If you're a born again believer right now, you are a part of the church, the body. This is the bride. And so that's a category. You are in a bucket. You and I are in a bucket. We're in a bucket. But the Old Testament saints, they are referred to as the friends of the bridegroom, right? And so that's why if you read Luke 16 or John, in the Gospel of John, when it's talking about John the Baptist refers to himself as the friend of the bridegroom, or maybe I can't remember. But John the Baptist is referred to as the friend of the bridegroom. And so if I was talking to like a group of people right now, and I was to bring up a man and say, you're representing Jesus, and I bring up a woman and saying, you're representing the church, and then I bring up 50 people over here, I'm like, you guys are all friends. These are the friends of the bridegroom. The friends of the bridegroom is the Old Testament saints. John the Baptist was a friend. He's not the bride. He's a friend. And so he's going to be there at this marriage supper. That's super cool to see this kind of stuff. Also, we talked about during this time, in Revelation chapter 19, very interesting topic. This is where you see the revelation. If you read the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 19 is the revelation of Jesus Christ. Revelation means unveiling. So in Revelation chapter 19, this is where Jesus is unveiled. He's unveiled. And what do I mean by him being unveiled? It's because of the clouds breaking. In Revelation chapter 19, verse 11, it talks about him returning on a white horse. It says in Revelation 19:11, it says, now I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. Fascinating. This is where he comes back as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Very, very awesome. We also talked about more. We talked about more about this. This was an amazing chapter. What in the world is going on here? How do you turn off? Okay, thank you. So many deep conversations to be had in Revelation chapter 19. You have the beast and the false prophet who are cast alive into the lake of fire, which is very interesting because there's nobody in the lake of fire right now. Think about that. I don't know if you guys knew that. I'm sure many of you did because we've said it a million times, but in case you're new here, there's nobody in the lake of fire right now. And so that begs the question, well, where are the people who died in their sins and never accepted Jesus as Lord and Savior? Well, they're in a place called Hades, which is a temporary waiting place. They are going to be resurrected at the end of the millennial kingdom, and they are going to stand before the great white throne judgment. We'll talk about that later when we get to that part. Anyways, Revelation chapter 20. We talked about the birds. Oh, in Revelation chapter 19, you see that God calls the birds to show up, and he calls them for the supper of the great God. Now, there's two different suppers that are mentioned in Revelation chapter 19. There is the marriage supper, which is the one you want to go to, and then there's the supper of the great God, which is the one you don't want to go to. You don't want to, I mean, we're going to be there, but we're going to be coming back in our glorified form. We're going to be in our glorified bodies, right? We're going to be on a horse. You hear that, Shrek? She called me a noble steed. But we're going to be coming back with him. And so we will be there, but you don't want to be there on earth. You don't want to be a part of it from the earth perspective. Anyways, the supper of the great God is basically where Jesus comes back and just wipes out all these armies that show up there, right? And so when you see that, he calls the birds to basically be like a little bit of a cleaning system. And so when you read Revelation 19, verse 17 to the end of the chapter, it goes hand in hand with Ezekiel chapter 39. Ezekiel chapter 39. If you read Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, you read about the Gog and Magog, right? And so it's really interesting. We talked about that before because that's something that many people are having on their radar as far as futuristic events because they are futuristic. Hey, thank you, Travis. Thank you so much for that gift. And we unpacked those things. We talked about them before. We'll talk about them again. But moving on to Revelation chapter 20. The focus, so here we're going to start winding down a little bit because we're finally approaching where we are going to be, what we're going to be talking about here. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you so much for that gift. In Revelation chapter 20, we are introduced to this phrase of, the phrase of 1,000 years. 1,000 years, 1,000 years, 1,000 years. It's mentioned like 6 times in Revelation chapter 20, verse 1 through 6. And so this 1,000 years is what you and I are going to refer to, or what many people refer to as the millennial kingdom. Now, it's interesting because this is a deep topic, but people, I just need you to understand different sides of things. I try to do my best to let you know what other people believe, and then I propose to you my idea, my belief. And as per usual, we are to test all things and to hold fast to that which is good, right? In Acts chapter 17, verse 11, Paul is talking about the Bereans, and he's like, hey guys, these guys were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica because they received the word with all readiness, and they searched the scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so. And thank you, Spaz Attack. And so it's really important for us to receive, and then to search. The challenge, though, is that many people just don't search. They don't search. There's a lot of people who hear, and they're like, okay, this is how it is, but then they don't do their own research. And so we are exhorted to study to show yourself approved, right? And so we need to really take that to heart. But the millennial kingdom is something that we need to recognize. And so I am proposing to you an idea that it is a literal 1,000-year reign where Jesus is on the earth. And within that 1,000 years, he is going to set up his kingdom. But before you can understand the millennial kingdom, okay, so this is going to be like Revelation chapter 20, part 5. We have been in this because I think it's important to really unpack these ideas because of where we're going after the book of Revelation. I think we might do the book of Genesis. Maybe we'll do Joel, but maybe Genesis. Regardless, we're going to get to Genesis sooner or later. But the reason why is because we're unpacking a lot of things that are paralleled from the book of Genesis. And so today specifically, we're going to be talking about certain covenants that are important to understand. And they are all screaming of a need for a literal millennial kingdom. And so that is the idea that I'm going to be proposing to you, that the covenants we've been talking about last time we talked about the hierarchy. There's going to be a hierarchy in the kingdom. You and I are going to be reigning and ruling with Jesus Christ. Jesus is going to be king. You and I are going to be reigning with him. And then under us are going to be the Gentile kings of the world. And then under the Gentile kings of the world, there's going to be the Gentile nations that are alive during the millennial kingdom. And so then on the Jewish side of his government, you're going to have King David reigning. And under King David, you're going to have the 12 apostles. And under the 12 apostles, they're going to be ruling the 12 tribes. And then under them, you have princes, you have counselors, and then you have Israel. And so there's a hierarchy. There's a chain of command that is all stemming from none other than Jesus Christ ruling as king. Jesus hasn't ruled as king yet. And so that is something that we need to recognize. And so that is going to be fulfilled in the millennial kingdom. And so this marriage supper, okay. This is another thing that we talked about. Before the millennial kingdom can begin, you need to recognize that there is 75 days, that there's a time period of 75 days. When the Great Tribulation ends, 75 days after that, there's going to be a sequence of events that actually occur. There's going to be 75 days, a time period. It's not going to go end of the tribulation, millennial kingdom. No, that's not how it starts. That's not how it goes. It's end of the tribulation, and then there's 75 days where Jesus is going to be setting up his kingdom and handling things that need to be handled. So there's like at least three things that are going to take place within that 75-day period. You can get the 75-day period from Daniel chapter 12, verse 12. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 11 and 12, we see that there's 75 days that extend after the Great Tribulation. And so the reason why that it extends that way is because there's things that need to be performed. One of those things is that the abomination of desolation is going to be removed. The abomination of desolation is going to remain 30 days in or after the Great Tribulation ends. And then that image is going to be taken down. That's one thing. People are going to be getting their resurrected bodies during that time. That's another idea because of 1 Corinthians 15. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 23, it talks about how each one in their own order. The word order there is a military term. So when you're talking about the resurrection in their bodies, and you see how everybody's going to get their own body in their own order, and you think of a military type of idea, and you imagine the military marching, and you imagine a platoon marching by, and then there's a little space, and then there's another platoon that marches by, and then there's a space, and then there's another platoon that marches by. That is a picture of how the resurrection seemed to be. Now, we understand to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But just because we're absent from the body doesn't mean that we are given a new body right away. So it's a rather deep kind of idea to really try to understand. I don't think we are given our bodies right away. Like if I died right now, I don't know if I'd get my body right away. I don't think it's immediately. I think there's a sequence of events, but that's something that we talked about before. It's really fascinating, and so hey, thank you, Jackie, thank you, Kenna. It's really interesting. It's a secondary issue at the end of the day, but there's a third thing that's going to take place in those 75 days. The third thing that seems to take place during those 75 days after the tribulation ends is the sheep and goat judgments. There's somebody in the comment section on YouTube who asked some questions, and it's always hard trying to figure out where people are coming from. Like I don't know if people are like testing me or trying to pry or hello Angel, or hey, thank you, Kenna. I don't know where people are coming from, so it's always difficult to it's like a balancing act, trying to gauge if they're trying to like what they're trying to accomplish or if they're actually being genuine. I thought this person was being genuine, and so I tried to do my best in responding. And next thing you know, he's telling me that saying that the Bible is lying to us all, and I'm just like, I'm like, okay, not at all what I'm saying here. But the sheep and goat judgments, there's going to be a time period where God or Jesus is going to gather the nations, and this is given to us in Joel chapter 3. Where he's going to gather the nations. He's going to gather the nations, and they are going to be divided. And this is also depicted in Matthew 25. And the idea is the sheep and goats. And so the sheep and goats, they're all Gentiles. And so the judgment that is going to be enforced during this time period, is going to be on Gentiles, and it's going to be based upon how they treated the Jewish people during the tribulation. Thank you, Kenna. Because if you think about it, the sheep are the ones who rejected the mark of the beast. The goats are the ones who received the mark of the beast. So the sheep who rejected the mark of the beast will be able to understand that what's going on. They're going to see what's happening to some extent. And so they're going to see the Jewish people. They're going to feed them because they were hungry. They're going to give them drink because they were thirsty. They're going to clothe them because they were naked. They're going to visit them in prison because they were thrown in prison. And that's what the sheep, the Gentiles, are going to be doing. And so Jesus is like, go ahead. And they're going to be like, when did we do these things to you? And Jesus is like, when you did it to the least of my brethren, when you did it to the Jewish people, you did it unto me. And so those who refuse the mark of the beast are going to be called sheep, and they are going to be let into the kingdom. They're literally physically going to walk their little itty bitty feet into the millennial kingdom, where you and I are going to be hooting and hollering and cheering them on and just being like over the moon for them just because they made it, right? And so it goes on the flip side of that. You have the goats. The goats are a picture of the Gentiles who receive the mark of the beast. And so many people are confused of the sheep and goat judgments because they're like, hey, is this a works-based type of salvation type of time period? And the answer is no, not at all. The answer is that they have already made their decision leading up to that judgment. Because up into the judgment, they already decided if they were going to get the mark of the beast and choose the Antichrist, or if they were going to choose Jesus Christ. They already made their decision up until this point. So it's not a works-based salvation. It is based upon their decision, and because of the decision that they made, they will be able to enter or be thrown into the lake of fire. And so that's the idea between the sheep and goat judgments, which is going to take place in that 75-year time period. But in Revelation chapter 20, we have this whole picture here, which is talking about the millennial kingdom. The millennial kingdom is very important to understand, and it's real. It's a real thing. And so that is what we're going to be diving into. We're trying to paint our best picture here as far as understanding why the millennial kingdom is real, because there are people who say it's not real. They will try to make it an allegory. They say that it's not a real thing, and if you think that the millennial kingdom is real, then you're ridiculous. I would argue differently. I think the millennial kingdom is the 1,000-year reign is fulfilling all kinds of prophecies throughout the Old Testament. And when you understand, not even the Old Testament, but even in the New. And so, but primarily in the Old Testament. And so we're going to be spending a lot of time in the Old Testament because we need to understand what's going on there. What's up, Sammy? How you doing? Hello. Okay, so that is the recap. That is the recap of Revelation chapter 1 and Revelation chapter 1 through 20 or so. And so now we're going to pause, and then we're going to dive into this topic of the covenants. And so I'm going to hopefully be able to explain to you some important aspects, ideas, some concepts. Hopefully you can wrap your mind around them, and then you can build on top of that. But these are things that are very, they're foundational. They're things we should know. And the reason why is because, how I say often how if you understand how it ends, then you can look back and be like, well, if it ends like this, then this is probably what this means, right? You can kind of like, if you understand where you're going, you can look back and where you've been type of idea. The same is true when it comes to the covenants. But the covenants are going so far back. Instead of looking into the future, they're going so far back. And so if you understand everlasting covenants, then you can have that idea in the back of your mind when you're reading the Bible. And if you remember the everlasting things, because there's some covenants that are just there for a certain, there's some unconditional covenants and there's some conditional covenants. And so when you recognize that idea and you recognize eternal things, if you're able to keep that in your mind as far as this is eternal, then all of a sudden, all the other things start kind of falling in place as well. So we're kind of looking at the same picture just from different angles and different methods of angles of attack, in a sense, trying to study. And that's what we're trying to do here. So, all right. So if you guys are new here, thank you so much for being here. It's awesome. We're just going through the Bible book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. And so if you're looking for a verse by verse Bible study, I would encourage you to check us out here on TikTok or on YouTube. I upload all of these studies to YouTube. There's a YouTube link up here. I just got banned on TikTok because somebody reported me for misinformation. And so I was just taken down. So if you were here for that and you were like, where'd he go? It's because of that. And so they're talking about getting rid of TikTok altogether here on January 18th or 19th. So if you wanted to follow me on YouTube, we could at least stay in touch if TikTok does go away. Thank you, Amber. So if you want to follow me here, it's ITZ_sheesh. There's a YouTube link in my TikTok profile if you wanted to go check that out or subscribe over there. I would appreciate it just so we can stay in touch. And I'm live streaming on TikTok and YouTube right now. So thank you guys for being on both platforms, on TikTok and YouTube. I just want you to know that if it does go away, these studies will continue. It just won't be able to be done on TikTok. It'll just be done on YouTube because those are the only two things I got. I only got TikTok and YouTube. All right. And as per usual, the main thing is always going to be the main thing. And that is, how do you know for sure you can get to heaven? We're talking about secondary issues here, but let's remember the primary issue. The primary issue is how to know for sure you can get to heaven. How do you get to heaven? That's what we need to understand. Well, you need to understand that you are a sinner first. You need to understand the bad news. And Romans, the first couple chapters in the book of Romans, paint you a very bad picture. It is saying that you are lost and you are not good enough, is basically summarizing the first couple chapters in the book of Romans. Paul is like, you're not good enough. And I'm like, I know. And so you're just like there and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm terrible. And so then when you understand that you're not good enough, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, then you continue reading and then you get more bad news. Hey, thank you, Charlie. In Romans 6:23, it says, for the wages of the sins that you have done is death. And so then all of a sudden you get more bad news and you're like, okay, cool. Not only am I a sinner and I fall short of God, which is the goal, I want to be with God. But since I fall short of God, now I understand that I'm under the death penalty because of that sin. But it doesn't end there. It says, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. It is through Jesus Christ our Lord, period. There's a period there. It's not through Jesus Christ our Lord, and it's through Jesus Christ our Lord. Ephesians 2:8-9, absolutely, Yogi, is for by grace you have been saved through faith. It's all about what he did on the cross. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. And so we recognize this to be true. It is by faith. And if you have faith and you believe that Jesus is God's son, that he led a sinless life, that he died on the cross for your sins, that he was buried and he rose again on the third day, if you have faith in him, if you put your faith in him, then you will be born again. That's being born again. If you're born again, if that's a genuine born againness, then your works are going to be a byproduct of that. You are naturally going to want to do these things. You are going to want to be like, okay, well, hey, if I understand that Jesus is God's son and he died, he took my place, I'm going to now want to be a part of what he's trying to reach other people. So I'm going to try to do the same thing because he saved me. If he saved me, I need to go tell other people. And so that is the whole, it's like a domino effect. And so it's not your works that save you. It is your faith that saves you. But when you have faith and you are born again, then your works come into play because of your faith. If your faith is genuine, your works are going to be authenticating your faith. And so, people say that the book of James and the book of Romans contradict each other. No. It's just a misunderstanding. But it is for by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. If you could get to heaven by being a good person or by obeying the law or keeping the Sabbath or, getting water baptized, then what in the world was the point of Jesus dying on the cross? It is Jesus dying on the cross. It is what he did. He paid it all. When he said it is finished, he said it is finished. It is finished. He's like, I did it, guys. He's like, this is it. And so we need to recognize that. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And so what a beautiful story. Unbelievable. Just so cool. All right, so we are going to start talking about, we're going to start diving into what we're going to be talking about here. That was all recap. That's all review. That's all stuff we've talked about before. Now we're going to get into the actual study. We're going to actually talk about what we're going to actually talk about here. So if you guys are new here, thank you so much for being here. My name is Ryan. It is awesome to have you guys. Thank you so much for being here. We're just going through the Bible, and it's super cool. I want you to remember these are secondary issues, and I would like to encourage you to test all things. Test all things, Paul tells us. Test all things. Hold fast to that which is good. And so I understand that I'm not right in everything that I believe. There are some things I say often, I can't wait to get to heaven to find out how wrong I've been on some of these things. There's some, I just can't wait. I'm going to be like, I've told 1,000 people that, and you're telling me that I was wrong the entire time, on these secondary issues. And so it's really interesting to allow that to just sink in, be like, man. And so then when you recognize that on these secondary issues, you're like, okay, well, you know what? Love. let's love. All right. So in Revelation, we're going to be talking, Revelation chapter 20, it says the phrase 1,000 years, 1,000 years, 1,000 years. So to kind of warm up into where we are going, let's talk about some of this regathering. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 7. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 7. And let's talk about, we talked about many things. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 7. There's many things that need to take place and it's going to be fulfilled in the millennial kingdom. The millennial kingdom is very real, and it's a real thing, and it's a literal thing, and because it actually needs to be literal in order for certain prophecies to be fulfilled. We talked about some of those things, that the reasons why it needs to be fulfilled, and one of those things was Israel needs to be restored and it needs to be regathered. So in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 7, wait, that's not it. Oh wait, no, I'm in the wrong chapter. I was going to say that is completely wrong. In Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 7, I was in Jeremiah 31, 6. In Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 7, let's read Jeremiah 31, verse 7 through 10. In Jeremiah 31, verse 7, it says, "For thus says the Lord, sing with gladness for Jacob." That's interesting, right? Sing with gladness. So singing with gladness for Jacob, for Israel, right? Like in Jeremiah 30, it says the time of Jacob's trouble. Jacob is, what was his name? What was his name changed to? His name was Jacob, but it was switched to Israel. So here in Jeremiah 31, verse 7, it says, "For thus says the Lord, sing with gladness for Jacob, and shout among the chief of the nations. Proclaim, give praise, and say, O Lord, save your people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country, and gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them, the blind and the lame, the woman with child, and the one who labors with child together. A great throng shall return there. They shall come with weeping, and with supplications I will lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters, in a straight way in which they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of the Lord, O nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He who scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him as a shepherd does his flock. Now, this is something that is going to be taking place or be fulfilled during the millennial kingdom, when they are restored, when they are regathered. But this occurs after Israel acknowledges their offense. They are going to, in verse 7, they are going to sing with gladness for Jacob, shout among the nations, proclaim, give praise, and say, O Lord, save your people, the remnant of Israel. The reason that this remnant is still exists at all, hey, thank you, Jules, good to see you. The reason why this remnant even exists is because they're the ones who God said that there would always be a remnant about. In Zechariah chapter 13, we learn, hey, thank you, Ma, Nika Bishop, thank you so much. The reason why we know that Israel is always going to remain is in Zechariah chapter 13, it says that God is going to eliminate 2/3 of the Jewish people. So 2/3, God is allowing 2/3 of the Jewish people to be cut off during the tribulation period. Think about that. Right now, I just saw a post from Amir Sarfati, and he made the statement that there are now 10 million people living in Israel. 10 million people living in Israel. And so not all of them are Jews, obviously, but let's just assume that there's 10 million Jews over there. He's going to eliminate 2/3 of that. 2/3, which means there's only going to be roughly 3 million Jewish people left. If that number, if that number is accurate. Now, obviously, there's Jews scattered around the world and whatnot, so it's just to give you an idea. But the picture here is that there's going to be a remnant. God is going to allow 2/3 of them to be cut off, but there's going to be a 1/3 that remains. And they're going to be brought through fire. They're going to be brought through the tribulation. And that's why in Daniel chapter 12, when it says a time, and half a time, it says that after that time, and half a time, it's going to take that 3.5 years to break the power of the people. So it's going to literally take the great tribulation in order for the Jewish people to acknowledge their offense. And their offense is none other than their rejection of Jesus as king during his first advent, during his first coming. And so the remnant is 144,000. No, I would argue differently, because the 144,000, their mission is going to be telling everybody about Jesus. Whereas the remnant are basically going to be hiding, and they're going to be going to specific places and stuff like that. So that's just something that you can work with. Anyways, in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 8, it says, Behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the ends of the earth, among them the blind and the lame, the woman with child and the one who labors with child together. A great throng shall return there. So basically, they'll all be regathered regardless of their health. So during this time period, God is going to basically make it simple for them. He's going to make it simple. In verse 9, it says, they will come with weeping and with supplications. I will lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way in which they shall not stumble. This regathering is going to be very simple for them to return. It's going to be a supernatural guidance that's going to be taking place during this regathering. He's going to make it easy for them to return. This is what seems to be what Jeremiah seems to be alluding to. But now let's go to Ezekiel chapter 11. Before we do that, in Jeremiah 31, verse 10, it's important to recognize what's going on in verse 10. Jeremiah 31, verse 10, it says, "Hear the word of the Lord, O nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, he who scattered Israel will gather him and keep him as a shepherd does his flock." He scattered them, and he's going to gather them. He scattered them, and he's going to gather them. Let's go to Ezekiel 11, verse 14. Ezekiel 11, verse 14. In Ezekiel 11, verse 14, it says, Ezekiel 11, verse 14 through 18, it says this, "Again, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, your brethren, your relatives, your countrymen, and all the house of Israel in its entirety are those about whom the inhabitants of Jerusalem have said, Get far away from the Lord. This land has been given to us as a possession. Therefore say, Thus says the Lord God, although I have cast them far off among the Gentiles, and although I have scattered them among the countries, yet I shall be a little sanctuary for them in the countries where they have gone. Therefore say, Thus says the Lord God, I will gather you from the peoples, assemble you from the countries where you have been scattered, and I will give you the land of Israel. And they will go there, and they will take away all its detestable things and all its abominations from there." Hey, thank you. Thank you so much, Tori. Thank you for that gift there. In verse 19, it says, "Then I will give them one heart, and I will put a new spirit within them, and take the stony heart of their flesh and give them a heart of flesh, that they may walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them. And they shall be my people, and I will be their God." Now, the reason why these Jewish people are going to actually keep his judgments and keep his walk in his statutes is because during the millennial kingdom, they are going to be supernaturally regenerated. They are going to be reborn. And so his spirit is going to be in them. And so during this time period, they are going to be able to walk in his statutes and to keep his judgments and to do them. That is going to be a supernatural time period. All the Jewish people are going to be believers during this time period. Really, really fascinating. The Jewish people, the remnant, are all going to be born again. There's not going to be one lost Jewish person alive during the millennial kingdom, which I think is very, very kind of cool to think about. But let's go to Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 24. Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 24. In Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 24, it says this. In Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 24, it says, "For I will take you from among the nations, gather you out of all countries, and bring you into your own land." So we're seeing this picture of a regathering, right? This is nothing new. This is just obviously kind of piggybacking off of what we talked about before. But now let's go to Amos chapter 9, verse 14. Amos chapter 9, verse 14. Amos chapter 9, verse 14. In Amos chapter 9, verse 14, it says this, "I will bring back the captives of my people Israel. They shall build the waste cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink wine from them. They shall also make gardens and eat fruit from them. I will plant them in their land, and no longer shall they be pulled up from the land I have given them, says the Lord. Now, this passage here in Amos chapter 9, verse 13 to the end of the chapter is really something to pay attention to, because this is God saying that he himself is going to plant them in their own land. He's going to do it. And he says in verse 15 that they will no longer be pulled up. Now, that's very fascinating, because this has to be a time period in the future, because we understand when you read the book of Zechariah, Zechariah chapter 12, Zechariah chapter Zechariah chapter 12 and Zechariah chapter 14 basically paints a picture of a time period where they are going to lose half of their city. That's what it says in Zechariah chapter 14, verse 1 and 2. So the idea here, just to kind of zoom out a little bit, is that when the two witnesses are on the earth, they are in front of the temple is standing, and they're doing their witnessing for the 3.5 years. And then at the end of the 3.5 years, the beast is going to emerge, make war with them, overcome them, they die, and then the beast will walk into the temple, and he will build the abomination of desolation. But this is going to take place in Jerusalem. And so when you recognize that when the Antichrist goes into that city, he's basically saying, this is my city. Like, Satan wants that city. He's like, this is my city. He goes into that temple, he sits down, he says, I'm God, you worship me. That's taking place in Jerusalem. It's very fascinating, right? Very, very fascinating to see that take place. But what you see during that time period is that there's all kinds of destruction that takes place inside the city of Jerusalem. The women are going to be ravished. There's going to be half the city that is going to be taken into captivity. And so when you recognize that that is yet future, and then you see that that is yet future, and then you read Amos chapter 9, and you see God is saying, I will plant them in their land, and they will no longer shall be pulled up. This means that there is going to be a time after that, to where the Jewish people are going to get their land. And the Jewish people have never received all of their land. That is yet future. They will possess it all. And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But I'm just trying to get you to understand there are certain things that are going to take place, and it's going to demand a literal millennial kingdom in order to fulfill these things. Let's go to Zechariah chapter 10 now. Zechariah chapter 10. Verse 8. In Zechariah chapter 10, verse 8 through 12, in Zechariah chapter 10, verse 8 through 12, we see this, we see them being scattered, and we see them being regathered. In Zechariah chapter 10, verse 8, it says, I will whistle for them and gather them, for I will redeem them, and they shall increase as they once increased. I will sow them among the peoples, and they shall remember me in far countries. They shall live together with their children, and they shall return. I will also bring them back from the land of Egypt and gather them from Assyria. I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon until no more room is found for them. And it's so interesting seeing what's going on here. But in verse 8, Zechariah chapter 10, verse 8, it says, I will whistle for them and gather them. The idea behind the word whistling, God whistling, he says, I will whistle for them and gather them. It has the idea of like the call of a shepherd in regards as what he does for his sheep. It's like the noise that the shepherd does, like the shepherd, like they know my voice, right? So this whistling is him calling his sheep. And so he is going to whistle, and they're going to gather because of that. In verse 9, Zechariah chapter 10, verse 9, it says that they are going to regather. We're talking about the regathering there. But in verse 10, it talks about how there is no more room is found for them. This is going to basically demand an expansion of their territory. Their land is going to grow. And they're going to basically inhabit this entire region of the promised land, and they're going to be out in they're going to have villages, they're going to have unwalled villages, they're going to be out in just like all around creation. They're just going to be enjoying this time period, and it's really kind of cool to see what's going on. But that's Zechariah chapter 10, talking about the regathering, the dispersion, the scattering, and the regathering. But now let's go to Matthew chapter 24, Matthew chapter 24, verse 31. This is should be a little bit more familiar to us because we went over this not too long ago. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 31, leading up to this, what we're about to read, Matthew chapter 24 basically is painting you a picture of events that are going to take place. In the first half of, or the first couple verses of Matthew 24, he's basically painting you a picture of the first 3.5 years. And then in Matthew 24, verse 31, he paints you a picture of the last 3.5 years, the Great Tribulation. And so basically the build up to Matthew 24, verse 31 is the building up of the second coming. So in Matthew 24, just reading into verse 29, Matthew 24, verse 29, it says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the Son of the Sign of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. This is talking about the second coming, obviously. But this is where we get to the verse that we are here for. In verse 31, in Matthew 24, verse 31, it says, and he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So here in verse 31, Matthew 24, verse 31, this is basically a summary of all what the prophets had to say about this second coming, about this second regathering, which is a worldwide regathering. And this will not be fulfilled until after the second coming. So this is referring to the second regathering. If you remember in Isaiah, Isaiah chapter 11, verse 11 and 12, Isaiah chapter 11, verse 11 and 12, it talks about the second, he said, I will gather you again a second time. And so it's really fascinating. This second regathering is going to be fulfilled after the second coming. So this is not something that is going to be fulfilled during our lifetime, but we are seeing it currently in process of being fulfilled because the Jewish people are trickling to Israel as we speak. There's people who are just migrating there, which is really kind of cool to see. It's just not going to be completed until Jesus returns. And that's kind of cool to see this kind of stuff take place real time. Okay, so that is just a little bit of a warm-up as far as the regathering is concerned, but let's talk about the millennial kingdom in a little bit of a different kind of view. So the reason why, or a reason that the millennial kingdom must occur is because of the Abrahamic Covenant. The Abrahamic Covenant is something that we need to try to really at least have an understanding, at least a little understanding of. Let's go to Genesis chapter 12. Real quick, and let's read Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 3. Let's read Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 3. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 3, it says this, now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. It's important to recognize that it says, in you, all the families of the earth. You and I are a part of that picture right there. Very kind of cool to see that. All the families of the earth shall be blessed because of Abraham. Now, that's fascinating. There's a lot to unpack in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 3. It's kind of interesting to pay attention to the I wills, because God says, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. There are 7 things mentioned that he's talking about in regards to Abraham. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. You shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse him who curses you. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Those are 7 things. 7 things. That's interesting, right? 7. We're seeing 7s all over the place, specifically when we're talking about Revelation things. Anyways, it makes you think of Ezekiel chapter No, it makes you think of Isaiah chapter 14, because in Isaiah chapter 14, Lucifer, he said in his heart, he's like, I will be like the Most High. And, those were his I wills. Here, these are God's I wills directed towards Abraham. And so that's kind of cool to see the connections there. But in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, it says, we read that. Let's go to Genesis 13, verse 14 through 17. Let's go to Genesis chapter 13, verse 14 through 17. In Genesis chapter 13, verse 14, it says, And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, Lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I give to you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and width, for I give it to you. Now, what's interesting about this entire thing is that during this time period, during this covenant was specifically directed towards Abraham, right? We understand that, or towards Abram. But what we need to recognize is that Abraham never possessed the land. He possessed very little of it, and he had to purchase it. And so during Abraham's lifetime, he didn't possess all of the land that God promised him. So there's some things that we can really take away from this. First thing that we need to recognize is that in order for this everlasting covenant, this is an everlasting covenant, this is an unconditional covenant. In order for this to be fulfilled, there's some things that we can pull from it. This implies that there is going to be a resurrection. That is going to have to take place. Now, this is important because when you study the Gospels, you stumble upon these dudes who are recognized or identify themselves to be Sadducees. And this is fascinating because the Sadducees, what's interesting about the Sadducees? They believe that there is no resurrection. And so Jesus handles it masterfully, and he uses Abraham to pull from, because in order for God to fulfill his promises that God made with Abraham, he needs to resurrect him, because there was not a time where Abraham possessed all of the land. And so it's interesting to just see what's really lurking behind the corners here. And it's a very, very cool thing, but the resurrection must happen. And this can only be fulfilled. This covenant, this Abrahamic covenant, can only be fulfilled in the millennial kingdom. It is going to be fulfilled in the millennial kingdom. We need to recognize that. That's God did not fulfill this with Abraham. Abraham did not possess all the land. So when you recognize that God did not hold up his end of the bargain, it leaves you wondering how he's going to do it. And he's going to do that by resurrecting him and placing him in the land during the millennial kingdom. The millennial kingdom answers these things. Thank you so much, Monica. Wow. Thank you so much for that gift. That's very kind. But here in Genesis 13, verse 14, he says, look northward, southward, eastward, and westward. Now, these are 4 directions, obviously, that needs no explanation. But what I want you to recognize is that there are no boundaries that are given here. And these boundaries are given in Genesis 15, verse 12. Let's go on over to Genesis chapter 15, verse 12. Because in Genesis chapter 15, verse 12, this is going to be basically where God, just so you can visualize it a little bit, kind of signs the covenant, right? So I want you to imagine that you have a contract and I present you a contract and I'm like, here is everything that you are getting, right? This is it. You get the house, you get the car, you get the dog. No, you don't get the dog. I get the dog. The dog is mine. No, but my point here is that just because there's a contract, I want you to imagine what we're about to read here is God actually signing it. So there's a contract. You have all of the things, all the terms. And here in Genesis 15, this seems to be, in a sense, where God seems to sign the contract. So in Genesis chapter 15, verse 12, it says, now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also, the nation whom they serve, I will judge. Afterward, they shall come out with great possessions. Now, as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. And it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. Now here, this is basically God puts Abraham in a deep sleep. And basically when people would make a covenant back during this time period, they would have two basic like altars or, set up. And both parties involved in the covenant would basically walk in a figure eight in around the both altars. And so what God does here, thank you, Sherry, is that, and the reason why two people would walk through it is it was both of them binding the covenant to each other. But what God does here is that God puts Abraham in a deep sleep, and when he puts him in a deep sleep, only God, Abraham's over here sleeping, and then God passes through them by himself. And so he says that the covenant is bound to himself and to himself alone. And so this is a one-sided covenant. This is God making a covenant to Abraham. And he's like, that's why he put him asleep. He's like, you are asleep, I'm doing this, and this is me towards you. This is me promising you all these things, and I am holding myself accountable to uphold these things, which is really cool. And so this is, in a sense, God signing the covenant. And also, there's other things that happens here. He also predicts the captivity of Israel for the 400 years. But here in Genesis chapter 14, let's read Genesis 15, verse 18. Because in Genesis 15, verse 18, this is where we get the boundaries for the promised land. So in Genesis 15, verse 18, it says, on the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your descendants, I have given this land. From the river Egypt to the great river, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadamites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites, and the mosquito bites. That last one I made up. But it's just interesting to see what's going on here. Here you are given the boundaries. These are the boundaries. And so it's really fascinating because he gives you markers that are in the land to pay attention to. He's like, okay, here's a map. You know that river up here, you know the river here. Okay, these are your boundaries as far as the land that I am promising to you. And so the river of Egypt is in the south. Now, the river of Egypt, people have different ideas as far as what the river of Egypt is actually alluding to, because it means something different when, we talked about the river of Egypt. What was that? In Psalm 72? I think it is. But the brook, sometimes this word here can be used as the brook of Egypt, and sometimes it's used as the river of Egypt. Basically, there's three ideas as far as what people try to imagine what this river being. Some people think it's the Nile. Some people think that it's the Wadi River, and then some other people believe that it's has more idea of the Suez Canal for the border. But this is that's the southern border, and that's basically what he's painting a picture of. He's painting a picture. He's like, your southern border is going to be all the way down here. This is going to be your land. He's talking to the Jewish people, mind you. And so he's all the way down in Egypt. That's where the southern border is. Right now, Israel does not own that. So this is yet future. They're going to own this in the future. This is going to take place during the millennial kingdom. So he gives them the southern border, but then he goes on and he says the river Euphrates. Now the river Euphrates is way up here, right? And so if you look at Israel on a map is right here. And so he's giving them the land from all the way up here to all the way here. So this is how vast that land has to expand. Now that's important to recognize because this has not yet happened. This is going to take place, again, they are going to possess this land during the millennial kingdom. But in verse 19 through 21, where it says the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadamites, all of those things, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, those were the people who actually possessed the land during the time. And so he's like, yeah, this is all their land. He's like, that's going to be your land. He's like, this is going to be yours. Okay. But that is the boundaries that are given there in Genesis chapter 15. But now let's go to Genesis chapter 26. In that, we're gonna fast forward a little bit. Genesis chapter 26, verse 2. Genesis chapter 26, verse 2. We'll just read Genesis chapter 26, verse 1. Genesis chapter 26, verse 1. It says, there was a famine in the land, besides the first famine that was in the days of Abram. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. Then the Lord appeared to him, Isaac, and said, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I shall tell you. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you, and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. And I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So here in Genesis chapter 26, what you're seeing is that this is a reconfirming, an affirmation of the covenant that God had already made with Abraham. So he made it with Abraham, and now he's making it again, or reconfirming it again to Isaac. Now what's interesting about this is that Isaac is told in verse 2, God says to Isaac, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land which I shall tell you. So Isaac is told to not leave the land. This is reconfirmed to Isaac, is what we need to recognize. This is reconfirmed to Isaac, not to Ishmael. You have Isaac and Ishmael, right? The son of promise and the son of bondage. That is basically, if you guys want to go back to, Galatians chapter 4 or 5. If you want to go to Galatians chapter 4 and 5, it's either one of those chapters, I can't remember. But and Paul, this is Paul talking. Yes, Galatians chapter 4. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 20. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 22. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 22. Hey, thank you, Positive Vibes. Thank you for that gift. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 22, it says, for it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one by the bond woman, the other by the free woman. But he who was of the bond woman was according to the flesh, and he of the free woman through promise, which things are symbolic. For these are the two covenants, the one on Mount Sinai, which he gives birth to bondage, which is Hagar. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in bondage with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all. So if you read this passage here, what Paul is basically, he's comparing and he's contrasting. So he's comparing two things all throughout these couple verses here. He's got two women. You have Sarah and Hagar, right? They had two sons. You have Isaac and Ishmael. One son was free. One son was in bondage. You have two covenants. You have two mountains. You have Mount Sinai and you have Mount Zion. You also have two cities. You have the earthly and heavenly Jerusalem in view there. And so here, going back to Genesis chapter 26, when you go back to Genesis chapter 26, you see this covenant, this Abrahamic covenant is confirmed to Isaac. And it's confirmed to Isaac, and it's not confirmed to Ishmael, which I think we need to pay attention to. That's something to be sensitive to, especially in the world that we're living in right now, with all the division with who Jesus is and whatnot. But what I want you to be sensitive to again is what takes place here in Genesis chapter 26, verse 2. In Genesis chapter 26, verse 2, it says, Then the Lord appeared to him and said, Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I shall tell you. Verse 3, it says, Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands. Now, what's interesting is that God, again, promises that he's giving it to Isaac specifically. It's not just to his descendants. It says, I give these lands to you and to your descendants. And so what's interesting, again, just like how Abraham, in order for God to make this come to fruition, there needs to be a resurrection. And in order for this resurrection to take place and for them after they're resurrected, in order for God to fulfill his end of the bargain, he needs to resurrect them, and there needs to be a literal 1,000 years to where they are going to inherit this land. And so that is why, again, a view for a very literal 1,000-year millennial kingdom. It just answers so many questions. So let's go to Genesis chapter 28, and now let's go look at Genesis 28, verse 13. In Genesis chapter 28, verse 13, we see a different side. We see this Abrahamic covenant confirmed again, and this is a good one. Genesis 28, verse 13. In Genesis chapter 28, verse 13, it says, And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. So here, this is God addressing Jacob. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So here we are talking about Jacob. The focus is now pivoting to Jacob. These are the patriarchs of the faith, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So here he's addressing Jacob, and he's confirming the Abrahamic covenant again. So in verse 13, Genesis 28, verse 13, it says, And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants. Also, your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and the east and the north and the south, and in you and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. So here in Genesis chapter 28, again, I want you to recognize this is something to pay attention to, or at least be sensitive to. In Genesis chapter 28, verse 13, it says, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants. He's giving it to Jacob. Again, this is a picture that enforces a resurrection. There needs to be a resurrection, which basically debunks the Sadducees that Jesus was contending with in Matthew. In the Gospels, the Sadducees, the Sadducees did not believe in a resurrection, which is why they were sad, you see. They were sad because they thought that after they died, it was just over. And so they didn't believe in the resurrection. And so that's why God or Jesus directs their attention to the Abrahamic covenant. And he's like, hey, how is God going to keep his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob if there is no resurrection? So let's go to Matthew chapter 8 real fast. Matthew chapter 8, verse 11. Matthew chapter 8, verse 11. If you guys are new here, thank you, Amber. If you guys are new here, thank you so much for being here. My name is Ryan. We're just going through the Bible verse by verse, chapter by chapter, book by book. We just happen to be going through the book of Revelation right now, even though we're not actually in the book of Revelation. We're unpacking ideas that are building on top of a literal millennial kingdom. And so if you guys wanted to keep in touch with this Bible study, I would encourage you to follow me on YouTube. There's a YouTube link up in my TikTok profile, and we're just going through the Bible book by book, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, and it's fun. And it's important to do, and it's important to grow and learn and grow and learn and grow and learn, because when you do that, then you tell other people about Jesus and you become a force to be reckoned with, which is super cool. And so all of these are uploaded to YouTube. Thank you, Amber. It's right here, ITZ_sheesh. And so if you wanted to go there, there's a link up in my profile. There's a link tree. You can also click on that and you'll see the YouTube link there. I'm live streaming on TikTok and on YouTube at the same time. I just got banned on TikTok, and so it's with the TikTok ban that could possibly be coming up here in January 18th or 19th. If you would like to stay in touch, I would encourage you to follow me on YouTube so that we can keep doing this, because I'm live streaming on YouTube right now. And so we'll continue these live streams on YouTube regardless, but something to consider. Anyways, in Matthew chapter 8, verse 11, it says this. Matthew chapter 8, verse 11, it says, "And I say to you that many will come from east and west and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven." These people are literally going to sit down with people who are dead. Think about that. That is what Jesus is saying. He's like, there are going to be people who are sitting down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. This kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, right? His kingdom shall have no end. His government is something that we talked about before in Isaiah chapter 9. His government is going to be perfect. We are going to be reigning and ruling with him out of Zion. Out of Zion comes forth the law, and out of Zion, which comes forth, which is where God is going to dwell, the law is going to come forth. It's going to come to you and I, and we are reigning with him, and we are going to basically, it's going to trickle down like a chain of command during the millennial kingdom. And so what I want you, again, just to be sensitive to, going back and looking at what we've talked about up until this point, in order for God to fulfill his promises to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, there needs to be things that take place. First, there needs to be a resurrection. I don't think we have any doubts about that. I think we all can conclude that there is going to be a resurrection. There's actually going to be two, but blessed are those who take part of the first resurrection. Right here, what we're talking about is the first resurrection. This first resurrection. Also, in Matthew chapter 8, verse 11, it talks about how people are going to sit down with Abraham and Isaac. That also implies a resurrection of bodies. So not only they're going to have their souls, to be absent from the body, present with the Lord, their souls are with the Lord, but there's going to be a resurrection of bodies to where they're going to be given new bodies. And so people are going to literally be sitting down. They're literally going to be eating and drinking, and it's going to be awesome. But you need to recognize that these covenants, the Abrahamic covenant, has not yet been fulfilled, because Abraham has not possessed all the land. God said, look around, all this land I give to you. He gave it to him, but Abraham never possessed it. And so since Abraham never possessed it, God did not make good on his promise back then, which implies he's going to make good on his promise in the future. In order for God to make good on his promise in the future, it requires a literal 1,000-year reign where they are going to be having their resurrected bodies. And so that is something that we need to be mindful of. And so that's the idea that's going on here. This demands a literal millennial kingdom. And the only reason I'm saying that is because there's people who don't think that there's going to be a literal 1,000-year reign. And so I'm just proposing to you that there is going to actually be a literal 1,000-year reign. Also, something to be sensitive to here in Genesis chapter 28, when God is reconfirming this Abraham covenant, I want you to recognize that he's confirming it to Jacob. He's not confirming it to Esau. Now, it's important because Esau was older. Esau was the older brother, so you would think that the older brother would get something. No, we always say it's Jacob and Esau. We never say Esau and Jacob. We always say Jacob and Esau. And so the order that we are given things, we need to pay attention to, and that's another picture of that is the 12 disciples. The first disciple mentioned is Peter. The last disciple mentioned is Judas. Okay, so let's continue on. Hello. So when you keep on reading. So going back to what we were talking about, in order for God to keep his word, there needs to be the resurrection. And then Abraham needs to possess it. Abraham needs to possess it. Isaac needs to possess it. And Jacob needs to possess the land. We talked about the boundaries. And what we need to recognize is that this covenant, this Abrahamic covenant, is an unconditional covenant. When you recognize what an unconditional covenant is compared to a conditional covenant, a unconditional covenant is basically where it doesn't matter what you do. You could, if God promised Abraham what he promised him, Abraham could literally rebel and go kicking and screaming and curse God and all these things, but it would not change God's mind on his covenant. It's unconditional. There's nothing anybody could do to break it. Even if everybody rebels with everything that they have, God's like, nope, it doesn't matter. I'm keeping my end of the bargain. In contrast to an unconditional covenant, there is a conditional covenant. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But this covenant, this Abrahamic covenant, it remains in effect today, and it remains in effect today regardless of their disobedience or regardless of their dispersion. They were scattered all over the place. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 26, verse 40. Leviticus chapter 26, verse 40. In Leviticus chapter 26, verse 40, we see that the Jewish people were scattered, right? We understand that. We talked about their restoration. We talked about their regathering. So we understand that they're scattered. But this Abrahamic covenant remains in effect regardless of that. So in Leviticus 26, verse 40, it says, "But if they confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their fathers with their unfaithfulness in which they were unfaithful to me, and that they also have walked contrary to me, and that I also have walked contrary to them and have brought them into the land of their enemies, if their uncircumcised hearts are humbled and they accept their guilt, then I will remember my covenant with Jacob and my covenant with Isaac and my covenant with Abraham. I will remember. I will remember the land. The land also shall be left empty by them, and will enjoy its Sabbaths while it lies desolate without them. They will accept their guilt, because they despised my judgments, and because their souls abhorred my statutes. Yet for all that, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not cast them away, nor shall I abhor them, to utterly destroy them and break my covenant with them. For I am the Lord their God. But for their sake, I will remember the covenant of their ancestors, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the nations, that I might be their God. I am the Lord." That's pretty neat. Pretty cool things. There seems to be some things that need to take place in order for the Jewish people to actually inherit this blessing. So the idea here is, basically throughout, the Old Testament, throughout the first 5 books of the Bible, God basically tells them, hey, if you do this, you will have blessings. If you do this, you will have blessings. If you don't do this, you will be cursed. There's blessings and curses that are sent from God. If you do what I tell you to do, you will be blessed, and it's going to be awesome. If you don't do what I tell you to do, you're going to be cursed, you're going to go into captivity, all these things are going to happen. It's going to be terrible. And so, obviously, as we understand, the Jewish people dropped the ball. They messed up. They dropped the ball, but they are still in the game. I don't want you to get the idea that we have replaced the church. I'm sorry, that the church has replaced Israel, because that is a doctrine that is being taught in the world right now, that the church replaced Israel. The reason why this doctrine is so dangerous is because if you are a born-again believer and you come to the conclusion that you and I are replacing Israel and that Israel is no longer necessary, what that does in your mind, whether you acknowledge it or not, that leaves the door open for anti-Semitism to enter in. And so if you are a born-again believer and you believe that the Jewish people are no longer necessary and they're no longer a picture of the bigger picture, then all of a sudden you start to look at the Jews as if they're kind of worthless, and what are they even here for? They are still in the game, and God loves them, and they are still his chosen people, and you and I, as the church, are to provoke them to jealousy, because they were supposed to be a light in the world. If you read the book of Ezekiel, what you'll find, I think it's like in Ezekiel 3 or something like that, God placed Israel in the center. It says God placed Israel in the midst of the nations. Now that's fascinating. Israel is the center of the world. That's from God's point of view. He's like, I placed you in the center, in the midst of the nations, as a light. Now it's fascinating to think about them being a light, because if you have a room, your light Just like just like whenever you're building a house or whatever, you want the light to be in the center of the room, right? Like you walk into your kitchen, the light, there's like a little light hanging off the, coming down a little bit. It's right in the center. And the reason why it's in the center is because that's where it gives off the most light. And so that's the picture that Israel was supposed to be. They were supposed to be a light. When people were like, hey, how come you're not working on this day? How come you're doing this? How come you're doing this? What's this feast about? What's this about? What's this about? They were supposed to be like, can I tell you about God? Can I tell you? Have a good one, Jason. Thanks for being here. Yeah, that's dangerous, Jaycon. No kidding, man. I'm telling you what, but it's just so interesting. That's what they were supposed to do, and that's what they were supposed to be, but they messed up. And so then they missed the time of their visitation. And so when Jesus rides over the hill and he starts, riding the donkey into Jerusalem, he weeps over Jerusalem. And it's because they missed the time of their visitation. And so that's why when Jesus he prophesied over them, and he's like, you are going to be blind. And then he prophesied over the judgment that took place in 70 AD when Jerusalem was destroyed. It's because they missed the time of their visitation. And so that is what is something that we need to recognize. And so they messed up, but they're down, but they're not out. And so they are going to be brought back in. They're going to be restored. This is going to take place. And so that is really, really kind of cool to see. But that's Leviticus chapter 26. But let's go to Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 25. Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 25. In Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 25, it says this. In Ezekiel 34, verse 25, it says, I will make a covenant of peace with them and cause wild beasts to cease from the land, and they will dwell safely in the wilderness and sleep in the woods. I will make them and the places all around my hill a blessing, and I will cause showers to come down in their season. There shall be showers of blessing. Then the trees of the field shall yield their fruit, and the earth shall yield her increase. They shall be safe in their land, and they shall know that I am the Lord, when I have broken the bands of their yoke and delivered them from the hand of those who enslave them. And they shall no longer be a prey for the nations, nor shall beasts of the land devour them, but they shall dwell safely, and no one shall make them afraid. I will raise up for them a garden of renown, and they shall no longer be consumed with hunger in the land, nor bear the shame of the Gentiles anymore. Thus they shall know that I, the Lord their God, am with them, and they, the house of Israel, are my people, says the Lord God. You are my flock, the flock of my pasture. You are men, and I am your God, says the Lord God. What I want you to recognize here in these verses, just like the bigger picture, this hasn't happened yet. Thank you so much, Monica. This hasn't happened because they are still a prey for the nations. It says in verse 28, and they shall no longer be a prey for the nations. Right now, they are a prey for the nations. Just look, just turn on, don't turn on the news. Don't do that. But follow the news that from the non-mainstream media. My point here is that the Jewish people are still being prey. They are surrounded. Like there's this ring of fire that is toppling right now. And so you see nations going against them, trying to wipe them out. And that is satanic. Satan's trying to eliminate them. We already established why. And he's going to, in Revelation chapter 12, when he's cast out of heaven for good, he is going to come down to earth and wreak havoc on the Jewish people as much as he possibly can. But here in Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 25 to the end of the chapter, you see a time that has not yet been completed. This has not happened. In verse 25, it says, I will make a covenant of peace with them. This covenant of peace, this is fascinating. Goes, this new covenant in Jeremiah chapter 31. It's going to be enacted. But here in Ezekiel 34, verse 25, it says, I will make a covenant of peace. What I think is so fascinating is that the people, right now, the Jewish people are looking for a covenant of peace. And so that is why Daniel 9:27 is so interesting, because they're looking for that. They want a covenant, and they're looking for it, and they're going to be anxious for it. And so they're still looking for this Messiah to show up. And this Messiah, whenever he does show up, this Antichrist, whenever he does show up, he's going to confirm a covenant, and he's going to be a peacemaker of sorts. He's going to be a Mr. Fix-It type kind of guy. And so it's just interesting to see that here, in contrast to the false covenant, the fake covenant, the 7-year covenant that the Antichrist is going to make with them, here God's like, I'm going to make a covenant of peace with them. That covenant is the one you want. That's the good one. But also pay attention in verse 25. It says, and they will dwell safely in the wilderness and sleep in the woods. Here in verse 26, it says, I will make them and the places all around my hill a blessing. I will cause showers to come down in their season, and there shall be showers of blessing. Showers of blessing, showers of blessing. Right? Okay, my point here is to get you to understand the visual. The visual. God is reigning in Jerusalem, right? He's reigning in Jerusalem. He's reigning on his holy hill, and on his holy hill, his a millennial temple is going to be built, and that is his dwelling place, right? And so there's this huge mountain that is where he's going to reign from, and he is going to cause all of his people and all the people around in the wilderness and in the woods, and I will make them and the places around my hill a blessing. These people are just going to be living out in the woods, just enjoying nature. There's going to be some dude up in the tree. What are you doing up there, Frank? Like all this kind of stuff. It is cool to see. These people are going to dwell safely. This is going to take place during the millennial kingdom, which goes hand in hand with what we read about in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, because these people, Ezekiel 38 rather, in Ezekiel chapter 38, it talks about how Gog is going to come against a people who are living safely, that are dwelling safely, a time where they have unwalled villages. This is that time. And so here, you see that this time is yet future. And so in order for this to be fulfilled, in order for people to dwell safely where there is a covenant of peace in effect, which is God's covenant, this needs to be fulfilled in a literal millennial kingdom. So that is what I am proposing to you. And so anyways, in verse 27, Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 27, it says, then the trees of the field shall yield their fruit, and the earth shall yield her increase. They shall be safe in their land, and they shall know that I am the Lord their God, and I have broken the bands of their yoke and delivered them from the hand of those who enslaved them. This is like fast forwarding into the future. This is really kind of cool. But it's also giving you a picture of the millennial atmosphere of the earth, because the millennial atmosphere of the earth during this time period is going to be very Edenic. It's going to be very Edenic, Eden-ish, the Garden of Eden. I'm so sorry. But it's going to be like Eden. It's going to be crazy. It's like the earth is going to just be, the rain is going to fall when it needs to fall. The earth is going to produce its fruit. It's going to yield its fruit. It's going to increase. I mean, whatever they want is going to happen. This is describing a future that is wonderful, and it is going to be so stinking neat. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 28. Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 28. In Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 28, Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 26, Ezekiel 36, verse 28, it says, then you shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers. You shall be my people, and I will be your God. I will deliver you from all your uncleanness. I will call for the grain and multiply it, and bring no famine upon you. And I will multiply the fruit of your trees and the increase of your fields, so that you need never again bear the reproach of famine among the nations. Then you will remember your evil ways and your deeds that were not good, and you will loathe yourselves in your own sight for your iniquities and your abominations. Not for your sake do I do this, says the Lord God. Let it be known to you. Be ashamed and confounded for your own ways, O house of Israel. Thus says the Lord God, on the day that I cleanse you from all your iniquities, I will also enable you to dwell in the cities, and the ruins shall be rebuilt. The desolate land shall be tilled instead of lying desolate in the sight of all who pass by. So they will say, this land that was desolate has become like the Garden of Eden, and the wasted, desolate, and ruined cities are now fortified and inhabited. Then the nations which are left all around you shall know that I, the Lord, have rebuilt the ruined places and planted what was desolate. I, the Lord, have spoken it, and I will do it. Thus says the Lord God, I will also let the house of Israel inquire of me to do this for them. I will increase their men like a flock offered as holy sacrifices, like the flock at Jerusalem on its feast days. So shall the ruined cities be filled with flocks of men. Then they shall know that I am the Lord. There's so many good things here. I mean, it's unbelievable. In verse 29, you see them dwelling in this land, but the grain is going to be multiplied. It is going to increase. You see that there's no longer going to be a famine in verse 30. That famine is a reproach. It's almost an embarrassment. It's a part of the curse. This world is under a curse. This curse is going to be in the future lifted. Verse 31 is very interesting, though. I think we should pay attention to this a little bit because verse 31 makes you question some things. At least it made me question some things. And so what I mean by that, it says in Ezekiel 36, verse 31, Ezekiel 36, verse 31, it says, then you will remember your evil ways. Now, okay, so I was thinking about this and I'm like, it's like, why? I was like, why are they remembering their evil ways? Let's go to Isaiah 65 real fast. And this basically was like, this kind of helped me differentiate two different things. In Isaiah 65 verse 17, bonjour, hello Private Benjamin, what's up? Bonjour. What is that cartoon the skunks? Do you guys remember the two skunks, like where the skunk, the guy skunk really liked the girl skunk? Goldie Hawn. Okay. Bonjour. Oh man, I am so sorry. Yes, okay. In Isaiah chapter 65, Pepe Le Pew. Yes, thank you. Yes, that's the one. I think it was Pepe Le Pew. That's too funny. Did he say it like that? I think he did. Bonjour. But anyways, Isaiah 65, squirrel. In Isaiah 65, you have an interesting verse. It says in Isaiah 65 verse 17, it says, For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered or come to mind. Okay, no, wait, hold on. I need to think. I thought I that's interesting. Anyways, Isaiah 65, in Isaiah 65 verse 17, it says, For behold, I create new heavens and new earth, and the former shall not be remembered or come to mind. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how these two. So you have the new heavens and new earth, obviously, which John sees in Revelation chapter 21. Okay. Fourth thing, the former shall not be remembered or come to mind. Behold, I create new heavens and new earth. The former shall not be remembered or come to mind. But here, they do remember them. Okay. Anyways, maybe it's not as difficult as what I thought it was. Maybe there's. So when we were going through Isaiah 65, okay, so that's strange. I'm going to have to think on. I did think about it, which is funny, but now that I'm saying it out loud, sometimes when I think, and then when I say it out loud, sometimes it's like making me rethink things. Anyways, Isaiah 65, verse 17, it talks about how the former shall not be remembered or come to mind. So when you couple that with what's going on here in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 31, God tells them specifically during the millennial kingdom, they will remember their evil ways. He says, then you will remember your evil ways and your deeds, that you were not good, and you will loathe yourselves in your own sight, and your iniquities and your abominations. Not for your sake do I do this, says the Lord. Let it be known to you. Be ashamed and confounded in your own ways, O house of Israel. Thus says, I'm going to have to review this. I'm going to have to think about that one. That's so strange to me. I can't think when you guys are looking at me. Stop it. Stop it. Okay. Anyways, stop looking at. Look over there. I'll put a pin in that one. We can come back to that one later. But that's Ezekiel chapter 36. Very interesting. One way or the other, during this time period, the land, this land, dig. Oh man, no, it's difficult. Like, cause my mind, like, I need silence, and you guys are being way too loud. It's way too noisy in here. Stop it. Okay. So, anyways. You're seeing this land. You're seeing it the grain multiplying. It's going to be like the Garden of Eden. It's unlike anything else. Let's go to Joel chapter 2, verse 18. Joel chapter 2, Joel chapter 2, verse 18. We'll just put a pin in that one. Actually, I should. What is that? Ezekiel. What was that? Ezekiel 36. Okay, Ezekiel 36. This one. Okay, I'll have to go back and revisit that one for my own mind. But Joel chapter 2, verse 18. In Joel chapter 2, verse 18 through 27, Joel chapter 2, verse 18 through 27, it says, "Then the Lord will be zealous for his land and pity his people. The Lord will answer and say to his people, 'Behold, I will send you grain and new wine and oil, and you will be satisfied by them. I will no longer make you a reproach among the nations, but I will remove far from you the northern army and will drive him away into a barren and desolate land, with his face towards the eastern sea and his back towards the western sea. His stench will come up and his foul odor will arise because he has done monstrous things.'" Ooh. Okay, wait. Okay. Verse 20, Joel chapter 2, verse 21, it says, "Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord has done marvelous things. Do not be afraid, you beast of the field, for the open pastures are springing up, and the tree bears its fruit. The fig tree and the vine yield their strength. Be glad, then, you children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given you the former rain faithfully, and he will cause the rain to come down for you, the former rain, and the latter rain in the first month. The threshing floors shall be full of wheat, and the vats shall overflow with new wine and oil. So I will restore to you the years that the swarming locusts have eaten, the crawling locust, the consuming locust, and the chewing locust, my great army which I sent among you. You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, who has dwelt wondrously with you. And my people shall never be put to shame. Then you shall know that I am in the midst of Israel. I am the Lord your God, and there is no other. My people shall never be put to shame." I wonder if that word locust is the same all the way. Can anybody check that out for me? Joel chapter 2, verse 25. Is the word locust used those 3 times the same? Same word, locust, same word each time. Just interesting. Just trying, I think it's Proverbs. That says the locusts have no king, which obviously makes sense because he's talking about the insects. The insects locusts have no king, but the locusts that come out, that were like locusts in Revelation chapter 13, they have a king, which is Apollyon or Abaddon or Destroyer. So obviously they're not, 2 different very things. Okay, so sorry, they are. Okay, thank you. So anyways, the picture here, sorry, my mind I just, so when you read out loud, I find it's very fascinating. When you read out loud and you say things out loud, there's things that are like, you're popping off in your own mind, which didn't happen before we did this. And so now it's just like, man, now I'm just like, I just want to look into some things here. But in Joel chapter 2, the idea here is to focus on a time period where this is going to be awesome. The feel, the vibe of this entire thing is super cool. Because in Joel chapter 2, verse 21 to the end, you see rejoicing. Hey, thank you, Judy. It says, be glad and rejoice. And then it talks about how the open pastures are springing up. The trees bear its fruit. The fig tree and the vine yield their strength. He says in verse 23, be glad. He talks about the rain, how the rain is going to arrive when the rain needs to arrive. It's really cool to see that, because during the millennial kingdom, there's people who are not going to get rain because they don't fall in line with the government, the perfect government that is in force. There's people that are still sinning during this millennial kingdom, and the result of that will be no rain, or a result of that will be no rain on them. But here you see rain is going to be given when they need it. In verse 24, it says, the threshing floors shall be full of wheat. The vats shall overflow with new wine and oil. I will restore to you the years. And he goes on and he says in verse 26, you shall eat in plenty and be satisfied. I mean, this whole thing is just painting a picture of a time that has not happened, is the whole point of being here right now in Joel chapter 2. This has not happened. It's going to take place, again, in the millennial kingdom. The millennial kingdom, a literal millennial kingdom, is what you're seeing, and I want you to be sensitive to it, that we are in the Old Testament. Many people will say that the idea of the millennial kingdom is only from Revelation chapter 20, verse 1 through 6. And hopefully, after everything that we're talking about here, you're seeing a very clear picture of a time that is yet future, and it's being pulled from the Old Testament. Let's go to Amos chapter 9, verse 13. Amos chapter 9, verse 13. This is a really cool picture. Amos chapter 9, verse 13. In Amos chapter 9, verse 13, it says this, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when the plowman shall overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes him who sows seed. The mountains shall drip with sweet wine, and all the hills shall flow with it. This is a picture right here of this. Okay, so I want you to imagine like I'm in the field and I'm plowing the field, right? Like I'm plowing the field, putting those lines in the field. And basically this whole picture is that the plowman is like trying to catch up. Like he's plowing while somebody else is reaping, but he continues because they just keep going around and around because the earth is just providing its fruit that quickly. It has the idea, like, you know how we plant right now and we got to wait like a month or so before we start to see something happen, and then it starts growing. It takes a long time. That's not how it's going to be during the millennial kingdom. During the millennial kingdom, people are going to be planting, they're going to be gathering, and then the people are planting and they're just like trying to keep up with each other. It's just like got to happen that quickly. That's the idea that's being painted here, which is super, super cool. And again, to kind of summarize in a roundabout way, I want you to recognize where we came from at the beginning of the study. Where we came from is from the Abrahamic Covenant. So all of the things that we are talking about is because of the basis of the Abrahamic Covenant. So this is, again, going back to where we began. We were starting about the Abrahamic Covenant in Genesis 12, and we read about it in Genesis 13. We went to chapter 26, chapter 28. We were all over the place talking about how it was confirmed to Abraham, then to Isaac, then to Jacob, and it is going to be fulfilled. It has not happened. And again, what we read in Ezekiel, what we read in Joel and Amos, what we're reading all over the place is a time yet future that is going to, where this is all going to take place, and it's on the basis of the Abrahamic Covenant, which has not yet been fulfilled yet. And so that Abrahamic Covenant, which happened long, long ago, is yet to be fulfilled in its fullness. And so what we're reading about all of this stuff taking place is on the foundation of the Abrahamic Covenant. And so we need to we need to really just allow that to be like a marker in our mind, like a huge, like a checkpoint in a sense. Okay, so that is focusing on the Abrahamic covenant. But now we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about a different covenant, and hopefully it'll be helpful to you. But if you guys are new here, thank you so much for being here. We're just going through the Bible. We're in the book of Revelation, but we're everywhere else at the time being, because we're trying to understand the millennial kingdom. And so in Revelation chapter 20, it talks about the millennial kingdom, the 1,000 years, 1,000 years, 1,000 years, 1,000 years. And so we're building a foundation to understanding what is going to be taking place in this millennial kingdom. There's things, there's descriptions. We can see we can like kind of peek through a window to see what it's going to be like on the other side. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do here. If you wouldn't mind following me, thank you, Amber, on YouTube, just because TikTok might be taken away from us here in less than a month, and I hope it doesn't happen. But this is my YouTube right here. It's ITZ_sheesh. There's also a link up in my TikTok profile. There's a link tree there that has this the YouTube link there, and some other links as well. If you would like to support this ministry, I would appreciate it. It's not necessary, but if you would like to, it is there as an option for you.